minutes long, and we will have the Q&A afterwards. So stick around after we are done. It's being recorded. I wanted to let you know that, and we will have that recording available on our YouTube station. We have a channel on, it's called NSU's Mailman Siegel Center on YouTube. So if you enjoyed the presentation today and you want to share it with any friends, families, or colleagues, feel free to find us on YouTube, and it will be available sometime this afternoon. We encourage your questions, so please do send us some questions. The PowerPoint that we will be using today is located in the materials section. If you go to your control panel and you click on the materials, you can download the presentation while we're on the presentation. So I suggest you do that at your leisure while you're listening in. So I'm thrilled to present to you two wonderful speakers we have today. I'm really excited. They've done a great job putting together this program, and they work really hard at our center. So the first one is Dr. Sohani Char. She is a bilingual licensed psychologist and clinical supervisor at the Developmental Assessment Clinic at the Unicorn Children's Foundation Clinic at the Mailman Siegel Center for Human Development. Dr. Char has extensive experience in the assessment of autism spectrum disorder and developmental delays, as well as working with families of diverse cultural backgrounds. So welcome, Dr. Char. And you're welcome. And Dr. Amrita Singh, she is a licensed psychologist and a clinical supervisor at the Developmental Assessment Clinic at the Unicorn Children's Foundation Clinic at Mailman Siegel Center at the same place as Sohani. And her specialty areas include assessment of neurodevelopmental disabilities such as autism spectrum disorder. She also facilitates social skills training groups at the Mailman Siegel Center for a young adult population. I'm thrilled to present to you Dr. Sohani Char. She will start our presentation off. So enjoy, and if you have questions, please, again, feel free to write them in the chat and we'll address them later.
Greetings to everyone. Thank you and welcome. Today we have a very important topic to cover, and I'm excited about this topic. It's something that we have, a passion for, and it's caring for the caregiver during COVID-19. We know that for parents, this time can be very stressful, and especially for parents of children with special needs. So we wanted to focus on you guys today and be able to give you some tips in order to care for yourself. And we'll talk about the importance. We'll talk about several things today, and we will cover some of the things that we're going to cover today include the feelings associated with an infectious disease outbreak. So we'll talk about those common experiences we're all having. And we're also going to explore the definition of self-care and what those barriers to self-care are. It's important to kind of recognize and identify those. And we're also going to talk about the stress management strategies for parents that you can implement during this time. So first, I just want to take a couple of seconds to just check in. I know that there's a lot of changes that have been happening throughout this time. And I would like for you to take a moment and think about what image or feeling or word best describes your experience. We know that you've had to juggle several roles. You're working from home, you're managing your day-to-day tasks, and what that might look like. So think about that. Take a few seconds for that. I know that some parents have talked about that it feels like it's a roller coaster. So it's full of ups and downs. So think about what that's like for you, and just, give that some thought. For some people, I like this bucket metaphor, which kind of talks about how we're constantly doing things to help others, right? But what are we doing to fill our own bucket? So there's a powerful quote that we'll see later on in the slides that talks about how you can't really serve from an empty vessel. So what is it that you're doing to kind of replenish that? So what kind of things like self-care are you doing? So when we engage in self-care, we're filling up our bucket, right? But we also have all of these holes, which are stressors that you're facing right now, that could deplete your emotional well-being, your own kind of mental health. So just think about that and think of the importance of filling up your own bucket before you can help others. Now, some of the feelings associated with an infectious disease outbreak that we've all been experiencing include fear or worry about your own health, the health of your loved ones. If you have parents and you have elderly in your family, you think about their health. You think about the potential of maybe a job loss, finances. So those are all things that are on people's mind. And the other thing is that we're talking about is the changes in sleep and eating patterns. So we know that for some people during this pandemic, it's been difficult to fall asleep. It's been difficult to stay asleep. So those are changes that we're all experiencing, as well as eating. You know, for some people, anxiety can make you eat more, and for some people, you don't really eat as much. So those are all common things that we're experiencing, as well as sleeping, concentrating, worsening of chronic health problems. So maybe if you suffer from high blood pressure, the stress can, increase that blood pressure. And then also things like worsening of mental health conditions. If you had anxiety, you're battling with depression before, these kind of experience can exacerbate those. So some of the changes that have occurred during a global pandemic, we see that a lot of people are working from home now. So that's definitely something that has changed. In some cases, some people have lost their position. The social distancing and the inability to see your loved ones can also create stress because we rely on family for support. We know that social support is important. And sometimes if we feel like we can't really see them and we can't really spend that time we used to spend with them, that can cause stress too. Of course, if you had travel plans canceled, that can be, a stressor. A lot of people, I mean, my birthday was during this pandemic and I had planned to travel and, I had this idea and plan in my head of what it would look like, but it turned out to be very different because I knew it was something that had to change. Now wearing masks and the gloves is a new norm. We have the, Instacart, rising because of delivery service. People don't really want to go out to the supermarket. And cleaning supplies right now, like a Lysol, it's so hard to find a Lysol. I know that toilet paper we've gone better with that. But in terms of cleaning supplies, like alcohol, that's still something that we don't typically see. So it can be a rare find. So these are all changes that we are seeing during this pandemic.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk a bit about some of the experiences that are unique to parenting a child who has autism. So in addition to all stressors related to COVID-19, you are also probably experiencing the fact that your child has now had all of this disruption in their routine, that your child might have had some temporary changes to their therapy services. They're now spending time at home with you, and you're really balancing multiple roles. So if you're working from home, you're having to be an employee, you're still also having to be a parent. And then if your child has been doing schooling at home the last couple months, you've also been playing the role almost of an educator. In addition to that, if therapy services have been discontinued or on pause, you're also might be playing the role of a therapist, which can be really hard to try to figure out how are you supposed to balance all of that. Are you even supposed to be doing all of that? Or are you supposed to just be a parent, caregiver? And then in addition to that, you might have multiple children in the home, or you might have a child who has autism and some other medical issues. So on top of that, you're concerned about their well-being and you're trying to balance everyone's care in that home. Your child or children might have a lot of questions about, the hand washing, what they're seeing in the news, why they have to wear a mask when they're going out. And if it's a child with autism, they're likely to ask the same question over and over again. And you're having to be very creative in how you explain that. So that in of itself can be a stressor. On top of all of this, as you all know, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And I think as parents of a child with special needs, when they first got a diagnosis, you felt that uncertainty for their future. You felt a lot of anxiety. And maybe you have been kind of coming to terms with it over time. And now suddenly there's another hurdle here where we all have uncertainty about our future, right, related to this pandemic. So you might have some anxiety and worry about, well, what's the summer going to look like for my child? What are the therapy services going to look like? And what is their academic life going to look like after this? So all of those worries are constantly kind of in our minds. And then on top of that, you've got a child that potentially might have some sensory difficulties. So I'm just gonna like briefly review these because I'm sure you're all familiar. But with autism, some children will have sensory aversive behaviors, right? So if they're sensitive to noises, perhaps they're going to run away, cry, cover their ears, or they display sensory seeking behaviors. So they are going to seek out that stimulation. And when there's change, such as what we've experienced, you might have noticed some changes in these sensory processing difficulties. Your child's mood might have been affected, their well-being, their physical well-being has been affected. So you might have seen some changes from these. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can manage those difficulties. If you have an older child or even a younger child and they've been doing a lot of activities at home related to structured school task, and you need to like help them with sensory aversive problems, what you can do is to help to minimize that stimulation when they have to focus. So we want to help them with their concentration. So, turning off the TV when they're supposed to work, make sure their bedroom doors closed, checking that the lighting's suitable, right? Because if they're on the computer screen, they're distracted by the screen, so they need good lighting. Making sure their workspace is clear of any unnecessary objects, perhaps using noise canceling headphones. And then if your child is one that's sensory seeking, perhaps giving them time where you have a timer set for them to really engage in that activity, especially if you need to do something that's planned and scheduled. So perhaps before a meal or going for a walk, you want to also give your child enough opportunities to engage in those sensory seeking behaviors. And then as far as dealing with sensory overload, I have some other suggestions. Go to the next slide, Dr. Char. Thank you. So if you are concerned that perhaps your child is experiencing some overload from sensory difficulties, maybe they're showing some agitation, maybe they're showing more anxiety than normal, or you're seeing some behavior changes. They're engaging in self-interest behaviors. At that point, you can definitely try to first rule out any physiological causes, like are they unwell or is there an illness that you need to be concerned about? And you can check with your medical provider about that. You can also ask yourself some questions to help to clarify some of this for yourself. So asking yourself, is there too much stimuli? Is it too intense right now? Or are they spending too long with a certain particular stimuli? You can even talk about it with your child and even problem solve with them. They might have some really good ideas for how they can get some relief. And really trust yourself. You have been, the expert on your child for a long time now, and you got really good instincts. So really trusting yourself on how to manage this can be helpful for reducing that stress. As far as medication, I want to just touch on this briefly. If you've been home with your children and your child happens to have any kind of psychiatric medication, you might have found that your child's suddenly asking questions. Well, why do I have to keep taking this? I feel fine. I'm home now. Everything's okay. And perhaps that's true. We do find that sometimes in stressful moments, we actually do feel fine. But what we also know is that feeling can be temporary. So we want to make sure that you're being consistent with any medication and that you're consulting with your doctor if you are considering changing that medication. Also, due to all of these changes, children will experience changes in their mood and stress levels. We also want to monitor them for any suicidal thoughts or behaviors. That's also why it's important to make sure the medications are kept in a secure, locked location and that you're complying with their schedule. So I just wanted to touch on this a little bit just because even though we're going to talk a lot about your self-care, I wanted to make sure we mention some of the things you can do to help your children. For behaviors, we're not going to talk a lot about how to manage behaviors, but I want to just, support you guys in letting you know it's okay to pick your battles right now. If your child isn't being the most productive child with all of their schoolwork, that's okay. School year is wrapping up. We would just want to prioritize which behaviors you want to really focus on and maybe be a little bit more flexible with the other ones. Really give your kids a lot of opportunities for success and positive feedback. They're used to having their own role in their classroom, and being at home, it's a little bit harder to do all of that. So giving them opportunities to be successful and to have their own time for independence might be really helpful. And really work together with your kids to celebrate all the fun and good things that are happening as well from being at home together as a group. So just to do a review of stress, when we think about stress, our bodies have a way of managing it, which is called the fight or flight response. So the fight or flight response is really our biological processes of understanding if we're at threat, there's a threat, or we're in danger. So your body's going to do so many different things to prepare you for that danger. Right now, we have all been experiencing a threat that's kind of invisible, right? And we're having to be very vigilant of our behaviors. We're having to manage working from home, or maybe we're an essential worker and we're still having to go outside. So your body is going through a lot of stress. And when that stress is prolonged, it can actually weaken your immune system. Especially since cortisol is released, it's going to be released in bigger amounts, and that will actually work against you in the long term. So when we have too much cortisol, it can impact our immune system and our ability to actually fight off infections. So that's why we're going to spend some time now talking about ways that you can manage that stress. And I'll turn over to Dr. Char.
Hello again. So yeah, so based on all the information that we talked about, the important, it's really important for us to think about what you can do. So how can you take care of yourself? And I found this quote, and I thought it was very powerful, and it says, taking care of yourself is the most powerful way to begin to take care of others. And I thought that was extremely, extremely powerful to be able to, know that we need to take care of ourselves before we can care for others. Now, what is self-care? So we know that self-care is a choice to engage in things or, in activities that are going to help you maintain an optimal level of overall health. So in this case, it just does not include, it's not just about physical health. It's also about psychological, emotional, social, and spiritual. So that, pretty much encompasses an individual's well-being. And I found these quotes online, and I thought that they were so powerful, especially in the times that we are living in. And one of the first ones that I found was, it says, put your own oxygen mask on first, whether it's on the plane, at home, or anywhere in life. So we understand that, and we know about it when you're on the plane. But right now, really, and it should always kind of be that kind of mentality that we have to kind of take care of ourselves to be able to care for others. And then there's another one that says, self-care is not selfish. You cannot serve from an empty vessel, which kind of goes back to that point I made with the bucket metaphor. And then the last one says, self-care means giving the world the best of you instead of what is left of you. And I thought there was so much power in that, because a lot of times we're kind of running on fumes, and there are a lot of ideas or beliefs that self-care is selfish. And that's why I want to talk about what the barriers to self-care are. So what are those barriers? They can be things like attitudes, beliefs, and culture. These things form personal barriers that can interfere with parents, caring for themselves. And, a lot of the times you hear you have to spend 100% of your time devoted to your children. Otherwise, you're not a good parent. If you're not doing, if you're not devoting all of your time to your child, whether they have special needs or not, then you're not being a good parent, because your life changed and now it's all about the child, and you kind of forget about you. But so it's important to ask yourself those questions, like, what does my culture say about, how about self-care, and what does that mean for you? And if you've been raised thinking, hey, I'm going to be I'm a bad mother if I spend time on myself, then obviously that's a barrier. So do you often say things like, I don't have time for myself? Do you think that it's being selfish to put your needs first? Do you feel guilty? A lot of times parents specifically feel guilty for spending time on themselves, especially when it comes to children with autism, because there's so much care involved, and there's so many things that are involved in caring for a child with special needs. And you think that I have to do everything in my power to make sure that this child, gets all the help they need. And but then often you feel guilty if you take a little bit of time for yourself. So, you have to kind of explore those feelings. And also, do you feel like you're the only one that can do things right? And this is something that a lot of us, kind of deal with, because oftentimes we're like, no, if I don't do it, it's not going to get done well. or I have to take on that responsibility because I know how to care for my child best. So think about those, explore those things and ask yourself those questions. And do you have trouble asking, difficulty asking for help? That's another one. And do you think that asking for help is a sign of weakness? A lot of times in different cultures and, for families, different families, asking help would be a sign of weakness. And can you identify with any of these? And if you do, kind of take some time to reflect and kind of see what those things are that are keeping you from caring for yourself. And one of the first things that, when we talk about stress management, because we're going to talk about stress management strategies, and one of the first things that we have to understand is that there are things that are in our control and there are things that are out of control. So that's what we call external, what's out, and internal, that's internal, what we can control. So we have to accept what is outside of what's outside of our control, but we also have to focus on what you can do. So what are the things that you can do and what are the things that you have no control over? And we have this little visual here, and it talks about, and I really liked it because it talks about what you can control, things like your kindness, your grace, a positive attitude. It doesn't mean that you're going to have a positive attitude 100% of the time. But things like limiting your social media or turning on the news, following the recommendations for safety, like those are things that you can control. If you go to the supermarket and people are not, maintaining the 6 feet distance, then you want to go ahead and kind of, get out of the way and maintain distance by you, taking control. So that's what you can do. You can't really do anything about what other people do, about whether they follow the guidelines or not. You can't really control what other people do, but you can control you and what you do. So that's, important. And for many families, especially for single parent households, we know that it can be difficult because you kind of have less support. And the common experiences that single parents are experiencing is that everyone needs the help at the same time, and it's just one of you. It's like you might be losing your cool more often because you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, and that's completely understandable. You might think about, what if I become sick and I can't care for my children? What's going to happen, a month from now? And those are all valid things. But what is it that you can control at this time? Like you can focus on today, you can take it day by day. You don't know what's going to happen a month, 2 months from now, but what can you do today? You might be worrying about losing your job, not being able to house your children. So that's definitely something that a lot of single parents are experiencing. And if you co-parent and you share custody, maybe your other, the other parent, you feel like they're not following the safety guidelines, and that can be a source of stress too. But we kind of remember what can you control and kind of what is outside of your control. And these are some goals that we found that kind of co-parent and like I'm sure some cruise director and that's a common experience, especially when you don't have that help. So the next one here that we have is the 2-parent household. So when we talk about a 2-parent household, what does that look like? Obviously, if you have a partner, that's going to have some more time and you're going to have some more help, so you can have some teamwork. So you can create a schedule that works for both of you. So maybe you can spend time with each child. So maybe your partner gets one child, and maybe you can spend time with their child. You can things that they enjoy. You can read a book together, you can color, do a chore together. Maybe it's baking, maybe it's cooking. And then that way, if you have multiple children, you can spend time with them. And also kind of check in with your partner, see how you're handling the stress as a parent. And asking for that feedback is going to be important too, right? Because maybe you feel like you're losing your temper more often, you're just overwhelmed. Maybe you're the one that stays home and maybe your partner's working, so you have a lot on your plate. So just be honest during this time. You know, I think honest communication is going to be vital, and say, look, I'm feeling overwhelmed. You know, it's a lot on my plate. I'm just tired, I'm exhausted, and kind of come up with a plan that you can do, so that you can kind of feel like you're reducing your stress a bit. And alone time is something that we're going to talk about in the next slide. And this me time or alone time is going to look different for everybody. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you're going to spend 1 hour. You know, you're not going to take a long bath for an hour. Maybe that's not going to be it for you. Maybe it's going to be simple things, like maybe eating a snack that you really enjoy without sharing with any of your kids. That's a self-care activity. A lot of times we think self-care is this, you know, oh, we have to spend 1 hour doing this, I'm going to get this done, and I'm going to take a long shower, and I'm just going to take a nap. Well, maybe that's not what it's going to be like for you. So it's going to be different for everybody, but it's important for everyone to kind of schedule in that alone time. Maybe when one of your children, maybe it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, they're doing an activity, you can kind of take some time and do deep breathing. And we'll talk about deep breathing in just a moment. But pleasant activity scheduling is going to be important for everyone in the family. So it can be things like, you know, painting your nails, reading a book chapter, you know, maybe for some of you might be a long bath. It can be things like, you know, cooking your favorite meal. So those are all different things that are considered self-care activities. So I'm going to turn it out now to Dr. Singh.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about how we can still stay connected with others during this time. The term staying socially distant is one that's a little of a pet peeve for me, because we don't want you to be distant socially from the people that are important in your lives. Certainly, you should maintain physical distance for safety, but we still want you to have that support system in place. So finding time to talk to maybe perhaps family members that are living even in the same state, but you're not able to see them, having scheduled time with them on FaceTime, or talking to family that's out of state, talking to your friends. You can set up time just to sit and have a glass of wine while talking to one of your best friends. You could even schedule time for games. I found some games have been really great on using Zoom, such as like charades or Pictionary. So if you want, you can even schedule some fun time using the technology to our benefit. Certainly still lean on your personal beliefs and your faith group for support. And then for other activities, as far as things you can do with your kids, you can even, you know, encourage them to go outside and stay socially connected with you by just saying, hey, their interests are, turn it into a fun game that you could do in the yard or you can do during a walk. And now I want to talk to you about how we can also monitor ourselves as far as the screen time.
I'm changing it 1 second.
Thank you. So even though we want you to kind of use technology to stay socially connected, I also want to recommend that you monitor how much time you're spending on the screens. If you're working from home, you're finding that you're sitting and you're just staring at a screen for hours. So, you know, taking time for those physical breaks is important. But it's also important to limit the time that you're spending reading the news, even just scrolling on your phone, on your social media tabs, right? If you're going to do that, just try to set an amount of time that you're doing that for the full day. And I would suggest disconnecting from all electronics at least 30 minutes before you plan to go to sleep. What we find is that when we're spending time on the screens, there's that light that's really impacting our ability to actually get tired. It's keeping us alert. So if you are disconnecting 30 minutes before bed, it's more likely that you're going to have a more restful sleep rather than you're reading the news in bed and then you're having difficulty actually falling asleep. Now, it's really hard right now, I think, day to day, trying to figure out what our routine is. So as much as you can, try to have some things that are happening at the same time each day so that there's some consistency there for you. Again, thinking about the things that you can control that's going to make you feel a little bit better about your day. That could be as simple as making sure that, you've got like your scheduled time for a snack or a walk, or just following your usual routines. If you're going to work, like you're getting up, you're still getting dressed, you're, doing all those normal things that you would do prior to work. And then for your kids, they rely on that routine. So really figuring out what is a new routine for my child, what's going to be the new normal that I can do here at home to implement for them. And again, really incorporating those physical breaks, because your child is going to have trouble knowing when to do that on their own. If you're a very organized person or you like to have that structure, you can even make a list, right? Have a list of all the things you want to accomplish that day, check it off as you go, and prioritize the ones that you can put off for another time, and be okay with understanding that if I didn't finish everything on my list, that's okay too. And then thinking about how everyone in the family can have a role can also help you guys all work efficiently as a team and bond. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Char.
Yes. So the next thing that we want to make sure that you guys understand is that this is a time where you need to be gentle with yourself. And a lot of times we're really hard on ourselves. And, parents especially, you want to be able to do all of these things. And, sometimes you feel like, oh, I'm not doing everything that I should be. But think about that we have to, it's important that we practice self-compassion, right? And forgiveness. Sometimes it's easier for us to practice compassion for other people and be more forgiving of others, but not necessarily with ourselves. So a lot of times parents can feel like, I'm not doing a good job because they're not getting their homework done, they're not getting their activities done, but it's okay. Nobody thought that this time would, nobody knew how we would respond. There wasn't a book and talking about how we should respond during a pandemic. So it's okay if maybe you had 5 things on your to-do list and you only got to 2. That's okay. So be gentle with yourself. It's kind of talking about what Dr. Singh was talking about. It's okay to have some flexibility, and then with routines, yes, routines are good and they're important. But if you don't, if you don't adhere strictly to that routine, it's okay too. We have to be flexible during these times. And we're not striving for perfection. Okay, during these times, it's important to emphasize connection over correction. It doesn't mean that you're gonna let your children kind of do whatever they want, but it's okay if sometimes they misbehave, because sometimes they're gonna misbehave. That's how sometimes they express how they're dealing with the changes. Okay, and just be aware of that. And the other thing is not comparing yourself to others. A lot of times you see this on social media. Some parents are saying, I got all my children doing their homework completed, and I did, 10 loads of laundry, and my house is clean. Great productive day. And then you might see that, and you're like, I haven't even been able to get 1 load of laundry done, and my child is kind of running around. So don't compare yourselves to others, because the truth is that sometimes on social media, people are not going to be very honest about their lives. So just be aware that you are different than somebody else, okay? And if they did that, great for them, but it doesn't mean that you have to do that too. And a lot of times we focus on the things of what we should have done. Don't dwell on the things that you should have done. We're taking it day by day. It's a pandemic, and we know that for children with special needs, these changes can be even more difficult. So one of the things that we talk about is trying to focus on the positive things. We know that there's a lot of things that maybe are not going well, but what is going well, and trying to kind of practice that ability to kind of remain or have a little bit of positive outlook. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to have these negative emotions. It doesn't mean that by any means. But what can we do that is going to kind of help us create a positive attitude? And one of the things is practicing gratitude. And there's a lot of research in the area of positive psychology that talks about the effects of gratitude on your overall well-being. And And it talks about how people can feel more positive emotions. They might be more forgiving. It might improve their overall physical health. Some studies have shown they're less physical. Their pain has decreased. It can help you deal with adversity and interpersonally as well. So there's research that is looking at how gratitude can help. And even in the midst of all of these things, there are some positive things that can come out of this. Some parents have said, I haven't had the time to have a dinner, with all of my children, and now I've never been able to kind of do chores together with my child, and I've been able to do this during this time, So how can you practice gratitude? And we don't have to think about major things, because we know that, for some people, these are really tough times. But little things that you might not think make an impact do make an impact. And one of the things that I personally do is I do a gratitude journal every night, and I kind of investigate during my day and what happened, during my day that I'm grateful for. So maybe, I went to the grocery store and it was about to rain and it started kind of drizzling, but I was able to get a parking space right in front of public. So I'm grateful for that. Yesterday I went for a walk and my husband thought that it was going to rain. I said, no, I don't think it's going to rain. So let's just go for a walk. And I said, okay, if it rains, it rains, but it didn't rain. You know what? I'm thankful it didn't rain. So it can be little small things like that. And those small things, obviously can make a big impact in the way that we feel. So try to see kind of the silver linings in some of these things. And another way that you can practice gratitude is creating gratitude wall. So one of the things that you can do is, kind of get a chalkboard or decide on a wall in your house where it's a chalkboard, or you can cut a large piece of paper or a washable, board, and you can use sticky notes for everything that you're grateful for. Maybe you're grateful for your pet, because you have that pet that you can bond with. Maybe it's something else, but have everyone in your family contribute so that it's kind of like a family event, and that can look like this. So you see, you have a chalkboard over here on one side, and I'm grateful that I was able to cook a meal today. It doesn't mean that you're gonna have to cook every day, but what are you grateful for and during that day? And we have another one here where your child can draw something, and it's something that everyone can be involved in. So those are different ways that you can practice gratitude. And like I mentioned before, gratitude can support our health in terms of our social well-being, psychological, physical. There's been a lot of research done on this topic. So now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Singh again.
All right, so as we mentioned, even though you might be practicing social distancing, it doesn't mean you have to stay trapped indoors all the time. If the weather is good, you can still go for walks, you can still go for hikes. If you have access to a pool in your own yard, that's something you can also use with your children. And then as far as your nutrition, you want to make sure you're having a really balanced and healthy meal. That can be hard because when we're stressed out, we snack, or at least I know I snack. So really thinking about how can I balance the meals that we're having throughout the day. Stress makes us seek out those comfort foods, like anything that's a lot of carbs and sugars. But we really want to work on being just mindful of how we're eating and what we're eating, so that again, we're reducing the chance that we're going to have extra stress over our physical health, right? Because sometimes our diet can be linked to our mood and anxiety. So right now, if you can try to fill your home with more fresh vegetables and fruits rather than worrying about processed foods. And if time management is also important for exercise. So when you're working from home and you're balancing parenting your kids and there's not a lot of childcare, it might be really hard finding time to exercise regularly. The one great benefit about this time is that a lot of different workout organizations are offering free trials of their programs. They're doing live workouts, videos, so you can use those. You can, of course, do a walk or a dance party. And as we mentioned before, we want to work on having an adequate amount of sleep. As best you can, try to make sure you're going to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time. Okay. Thank you. And then as far as some relaxation techniques that we often find is very helpful, there's a variety here, and really what you can do is kind of mix and match or even combine some of these for whatever works best for you. One that's always been really helpful is diaphragmatic deep breathing. So just to kind of describe this to you, it basically means when you're doing the breathing exercise, you're doing an inhalation very slowly. So perhaps you're inhaling for 5 seconds for a count of 5, and then you're going to hold that breath for a count of 5 seconds, and then you're going to release it slowly for 5 seconds. Then you want to do that entire cycle at least 5 more times. And the reason I recommend doing it multiple times in a row is that you really want your lungs to really get the opportunity to get as much oxygen as possible for you to really get the benefit of doing the breathing. If you only do it once, you're really not going to feel relaxed or a change, and then you probably be like, well, this doesn't work, and give up. So I recommend you try doing it where you're repeating the whole cycle 5 times. Guided imagery can be really helpful for some people. With this, what you want to do is try to have an image in your mind of a place that's very calm or peaceful, or it can even be a happy memory that you think about. If you are going to think about an image of perhaps the beach, what you want to do is really think about all of your 5 senses. So how does the sand feel between your toes? What does the breeze feel like? What are the sounds you're hearing, right, from the ocean? If you have a cold drink in your hand, how does that drink taste? So really trying to target all of your senses while doing the guided imagery will make it a little bit more powerful because it fully puts you in that setting. Progressive muscle relaxation can also be helpful, especially now that we're spending a lot of time sitting in front of a computer screen. We're probably carrying a lot of tension in our necks or our shoulders. So if you do a progressive relaxation exercise, you can target each muscle group, and you're working on feeling that tension and then also feeling that deep relaxation. And by doing that, you might become a little bit more mindful of how you're sitting, of which parts of your body carry stress. In addition to all of these, mindfulness can be really helpful. So if you're someone that enjoys mindfulness, that you practice it as much as you can, because as we've mentioned, we all have a lot of worries right now about the future. And by doing some mindfulness focused activities, it keeps you more focused in the present. Certainly, if things are very overwhelming and you've tried a lot of different strategies and you're having difficulty kind of troubleshooting, you can certainly seek out the support of a psychologist or another mental health provider. A lot of them are doing services via telehealth. We recommend that you consult with your insurance companies about which providers are covered. We also recommend that you do your research. Make sure those providers are licensed and that they are doing evidence-based treatment that's going to be helpful for you. So overall, just to kind of summarize, we want to think about what are some attainable and feasible goals for the activities that you choose, right? So if you're going to pick some activities, think about how you can implement them. Are they actually enjoyable? And if you are going to make a plan, test it out, right? So after you do it for 15 days, maybe reassess and think, well, was that actually effective? Did it help me? Or maybe I need to change it up. Because really with self-care, it takes practice. It takes practice to see what works. And certainly during this time, something that worked on Monday might not work on Friday. So it's okay to also be flexible with the goals that you set for yourself. Okay. So we chose this quote because we really think it's relevant right now. Be strong now because things will get better. It might be stormy now, but it can't rain forever. And as any Floridian knows, you might have some really heavy rain on one day, but the very next day, the weather is gorgeous and beautiful. So we want to really keep that in mind, that this particular hour might be hard, or this particular 30 minutes might be hard, but it's not going to last forever. Things will eventually kind of stabilize and get better. And then I have some testimonials that I want to share of some families that I found on his article on spectrumnews.org. I personally enjoyed reading it just because it was focused on how different families with children with autism, or even adult children with autism, have experienced the pandemic. And it just kind of points out how this experience is so universal and we're all sort of experiencing the same thing. So I'll just briefly read this one for you. This is from a family in Israel, and the child is 15 years old. Mark read the coronavirus news, so he understood what was happening, and that fueled his anxieties. He couldn't distinguish real news from rumors, so I suggested that he read only trusted sources, such as the Ministry of Health website, and that helped. The other challenge was losing the regular schedule. Before the lockdown, a bus took Mark to school, and on certain days we went out for pizza. Setting up a new routine was crucial. Remote learning certainly helped, but so did giving Mark new responsibilities. Now he empties the dishwasher every morning. He's also responsible to make sure we have bread in the house. When we run out, he puts on a mask and gloves and he walks to a nearby store. He started helping me cook, and it became a new hobby. He doesn't like to cut onions, but otherwise he's really good at it. So far, he's made a sauce for lasagna, cutlets, and schnitzels. He's even baking bread. I now telecommute, so his help has allowed me to have more time for my work. Surprisingly, the quarantine has had some positive outcomes for us. So the reason I like these testimonials is that it's sort of showing that it can start off really rough. We've all got changes to our routines, but eventually things might settle in and some positive things might come from this. For this family in particular, he's learned how to do a lot of different cooking. So that's really going to help him in the long term in life too. The next one I'm not going to read for time reasons, and I want to make sure we have enough time for us to ask questions, but you can certainly read it in your own time.
Alrighty, so before we finish, we just thought that this is important. We're going to get through this together, and we know that these are difficult times for parents, but we're just, it's important to take it day by day, and you just know that we're going to get through this together. And if any of you need, to contact us, what we do in our clinic is a developmental assessment clinic at the Unicorn Children's Foundation, which is housed at the Mammoth Eagle Center for Human Development. You can contact Jennifer Hall at the number and the email here. And what we do is we conduct evaluations for children who are exhibiting developmental delays, who are showing signs, of autism spectrum disorder, or are having behavioral difficulties. And we see children as young as 18 months. All the way to 18 years of age. So if you are interested in having your child evaluated, once we do reopen, we encourage you to contact Jennifer Hall, and her information is on the screen. So if you do have any questions, you can contact her. But any questions now? We'll have some minutes to go over any questions that you all might have.
I see we had one person write in a question, Crystal. I'll read her question for you guys and you guys can answer it. She writes, okay. I initially thought that this was a good time to potty train my 3-year-old who is on the spectrum, but working from home has actually been way more stressful actually going into the office than going into the office. Would you suggest waiting until things are a bit more normal and he isn't feeding off my own stress?
Yes. Well, I don't know. I think that there are a lot of changes going on right now. It's a time where, especially for children on the spectrum, where the change of routines, there's so many changes happening that it can be difficult for them to process their own stress. So if that's going to add stress to the child and to the mom at the same time, then maybe not the best time to engage in potty training. Dr. Singh, what do you think?
I think you can sort of find a goal that's a little bit more attainable. So maybe you're not going to do scheduled sits, but when your child does need to be changed, you're using more verbal language to kind of let him or her know that, oh, all right, it's time to go to the potty. So at least you're kind of modeling what those steps would be, even if you're not implementing a scheduled toilet training routine. I definitely think thinking about what's going to be, the best fit for you and your child right now is what's more important rather than meeting that toilet training goal at that particular age.
Right, because I think she mentioned she was stressed about working from home. So, you know, you want to think about that. Like, is that going to create more stress for you as a parent? And, you know, children on the spectrum, even sometimes, even though they can't really communicate how they feel, they can definitely perceive that. So, like Dr. Singh said, you know, maybe focusing on different behaviors that can kind of help the child get ready would probably be ideal, instead of maybe the goal being completely toiletry.
I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. Any other questions, anybody? Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Singh and Dr. Char, for your wonderful information. It was very great information and very timely. And like Dr. Char said, you can reach us if you need to call and wanted to have some information about our clinics. You can call 954-262-7122. And I also put in the chat our website if you want to look at our programs that we have at the Mailman Siegel Center for Human Development. You can go to msc.nova.edu and you can find all the information there as well. And again, on our YouTube channel, if you go to NSU's Mailman Siegel Center on YouTube, this video will be there later today or tomorrow. So thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it. And we wish everyone well, be safe and healthy. And we hope to see each other in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.